We're talking about a young man assassinated for his faith, his message, and for his courage. What Charlie Kirk represented was an alternative to violence, to the hate, to the divisions. He said, I'll debate you on the merit of our ideas.
Words are the way in which we communicate. You shut down words, you shut down life. Just because I disagree with you, you disagree with me, doesn't mean I hate you.
When we stop talking, horrible things happen. Those who would seek to silence his voice, they have done the opposite. Charlie Kirk's ideas are now part of a fabric that this country and the world has to come to terms with.
What people are saying is, if you don't agree with me, you hate me. You're committing violence against me.
Yes.
If you say something that offends me, it's violent, and I have the right to react violently in self-defense. It's such a dark notion.
Unless you debate these ideas openly, passionately, young people like the assassin, Tyler, they end up in echo chambers where no one's debating anything.
Yeah.
And you get radicalized.
We're not saying agree with Charlie. We're saying let's love each other, respect each other, honor each other. Words are not violence.
Yes.
Offense is not bad, and we all created equal.
Hey, I'm Khalil Osiris coming to you live from Florida, United States of America. We've got a lot to talk about today, brother, and I'm excited to be in this conversation with you, particularly about all of these challenging issues we've got to face.
Absolutely, Khalil. Yeah, Craig Wilkinson here, across the other side of the world, tip of Africa, South Africa, Johannesburg. And Khalil, always wonderful to be with you, brother. We've shared a lot together.
Yes.
We've spoken for hours and hours. And but today, wow. There's a lot to talk about,
Yes.
man. A lot to talk about, and so important. I mean, the Charlie Kirk death, as we were speaking now, just prior to coming on air, it's like it's ignited something, and
Yeah.
it's ignited something pretty powerful, and so much to unpack.
Yeah, we have to look at this.
and how we respond to this and how we move forward is so crucial in so many different ways,
Well,
man. Yeah.
Yeah, well, one of the things I just kind of to provide some context here, we're talking about a young man, Charlie Kirk, who was assassinated for his faith, for his message, and for his courage to go out and vigorously debate the issues.
Yeah.
Charlie Kirk
Yeah.
did not advocate for violence. He did not in any way, shape, or form encourage or promote violence. In fact, what Charlie Kirk represented was an alternative to violence. It was an alternative to the hate. It was an alternative to the divisions. Because he said, regardless if you agreed with his ideologies, his beliefs or not, he said, I'll debate you on the merit of our ideas.
Yeah. Yeah.
That is, for
Which is
me,
the only way to do it, isn't it?
He was an example of what the solution is. So his assassination, for me, triggers something that makes us all question. Are we really in this for solutions? Are we in this? Why are we in this? What is this about for us? If it's not truth seeking and growth and recognizing that you can love someone who is different than you and who has values or beliefs different than yours without becoming violent. So,
Well, I think one of the big misconceptions and distortions of reality today is the concept that words are violent.
yes.
There's that concept, that words are violent. So, I mean, the justification of it was he was perceived to be being violent just because of the words he used.
Yes.
And I think that's such an incredible error. I mean, words are the way in which we communicate. You shut down words, you shut down life.
Certainly.
You shut down relationship, you shut down humanity, I mean,
And that's a
if
big
there's no
point you
talking
make,
in
brother.
marriage, what happens? Divorce. There's no talking between parties, what happens? War happens, So words and talk are, and just because I disagree with you, you disagree with me, doesn't mean I hate you. It doesn't mean
No.
my words are perpetrating a violence on you. The whole issue, I mean, Akala, you and I grew up with
Oh,
with offense.
yes.
I mean, the world has offense in it,
Yes.
People piss you off. People say wrong things. People, even bad people, say horrible things. And you know what? It's part of life. You got to deal with it. And unless you learn to deal with offensive words, you're not living in the real world. You're living in a very dark, dangerous world.
Yes. And that's why that is why Charlie Kirk's death is so deeply disturbing. That is why this assassination, and I'm calling it what it is. It was intentional.
Yeah, it is.
And it was politically motivated as much as personally carried out. And I say politically motivated in the context of all of the reports, all of the information that we're now getting shows that this young man who murdered him did not like his ideology. And that, and I want to say, the governor of Utah, Governor Cox, one of the things he said in some of the footage I saw was initially he said he prayed that that the perpetrator was not a Utahn, a person from Utah. He prayed that. And he then had to come to terms with the fact that this was not only a person from Utah, but this is a young man raised in a family with law enforcement.
Right.
A family that had a father who was actively part of law enforcement in Utah.
Mm.
So this is bigger than any of the kind of pigeonholing and labeling and all of that that we typically do. This is saying that we have something really complicated, really deep that we've got to face.
Well, it in some ways it reminds me a little bit of that series that came out called Adolescence, where it showed the young boy stabbing to death a young girl, and what had happened was he'd become radicalized.
Yes.
Through what he watched on social media, on internet, and that happens when you go into an echo chamber. You go down a route, and all you hear is things that are and then the algorithm feeds you what you want to hear, and you get stuck in this very dark, doom scrolling downward spiral, and brainwashed to the point where you believe you're actually doing the world a favor. I mean, I want to just show a clip here, Khalil, of mixed reactions, and some of them are so, it's almost hard to play them because they're so dark and so, rejoicing at the death of someone. I mean, it's just phenomenal, and others are obviously very positive, and they come from across the spectrum.
I just watched a close-up video of Charlie Kirk getting pewed in the neck, so you know what time it is.
Got pewed in the throat, so that in his final moments he couldn't in fact speak. I think that's just poetic justice.
After hearing news like this, some form of memoriam is expected. So, in honor of his noble sacrifice, I am going to be getting absolutely blitzed tonight. Who's with me?
You can't stop with these awful thoughts you have and then saying these awful words and not expect awful actions to take place.
In a moment of prayer out loud for Charlie and his family.
This is Congress.
Shh. Let's wait a minute. The House will be in order. The House will be in order.
Don't care what his political beliefs were. I don't care what he felt. I care about the fact that a man was gunned down in front of two of his children who are 5 years of age or less, that he's dead at the age of 31, that his wife is a widow, that his children are fatherless because his ideas and his beliefs differed from somebody else, apparently. And then I'm going online and I'm seeing people celebrating it. Shame. Shame on you. Mr. Charlie Kirk, who had been going from campus to campus, simply debating his ideas against those who might differ from him. That's all. I don't give a damn who you are. Black, white, or anything in between. You're a human being. That's your fellow man and fellow woman out there. That's your fellow brother and fellow sister out there. You got no business thinking like that.
His wife and children were in attendance, dude. Imagine being a 12-year-old, watching your dad die. Nobody deserves that. It is so sad. It is so wrong. It is life-altering. I don't like the guy, but I still talked to him multiple times, sat down with him. You know, that was somebody that I had sat across the table from.
I can care less about your political views. I can care less about your religious views. If you're laughing about that man's passing, you're evil. There's people making videos and laughing about this 31-year-old man getting shot in his neck on national TV at a campus of all places, answering questions, talking to people. You guys are so fragile-minded, y'all can't stand other people's opinions and beliefs no more? Like, real talk. Like, if somebody has a different opinion than you, or a different belief system, or stands on a different side, y'all want to kill them. This world is sick, bro. You're laughing about a person that just left his kids on this earth. Them kids won't even get to see their daddy no more. His woman, a widow. You know, he connected to a lot of our youth. I'm part of that youth. Regardless if it was the Democratic Party and somebody died, if it was the Republican Party and somebody died, I would not be laughing at somebody's death, bro. This man was trying to create a positive change. You kill a man for speaking his opinion.
Wow.
Hey, Khalil, I mean, I think one of the key points that comes across there, this is not actually not political. It's not about,
No.
it's about humanity, isn't it?
Yes, it is.
It's about, and I think, you know, the world used to be far less divided. There were so many more people in the center.
Yeah.
Whether they were slightly left of center or slightly right of center, there were people who loved humanity and who wanted good to happen.
Yeah.
And who wanted to honor the family unit and honor people's faith and respect each other's differences. There was and you know, I hope that there is still the majority in that band.
Yeah.
That band of people who, you know, whether you vote Democrat or Republican, you're still a human being who loves human beings and who respects other human beings and who wants to have honest dialogue and who actually wants to seek the truth. And if you come to different conclusions about what the truth is, you know, that's not the issue. The issue is I respect you if you come to a slightly different, you know.
Yes.
And I think Charlie did that. You know, he debated atheists. He was a very committed Christian, debated atheists and respected them.
Yes.
And I hope that the majority of us are still there and that the people who react in this insane, dark, evil way are in the minority.
It's insane.
Sure, Khalil. Sobering,
Yeah.
man. Sobering.
It's very sobering. Very, very sobering. And the fact that someone would celebrate his assassination is sickening. It's just sickening.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
And the whole idea, this whole argument that somehow every time you say the word conservative, it's almost like the label follows racist. So there's so many, I've heard so many people suggesting and saying that Charlie Kirk was racist. And I mean, saying these things as if that, even if that were true, it would not be reason to murder someone. Even if it were true, I personally had a very different perception of Charlie Kirk as a person driven by his faith in God, his belief in humanity.
And desire for the truth wherever it may be found. Yeah.
And I've read about the number of young Black men who were influenced, whose views were transformed through debate with him, through dialogue, through conversation. And I, in fact, just preparing for this podcast, this session, I went back over and looked at some of the tapes, and one that really stood out to me was when he was debating an African-American man young student, who challenged him on all of his beliefs, and every question that Charlie answered, every question that he addressed, he sought to frame it in the context of his faith in God and his belief in humanity. So this nonsense that somehow people are trying to justify this evil by saying things like he was racist and all that is absolutely unacceptable.
And isn't it astonishing how we put someone in a box, often because of what someone we know, something that someone we know said.
Yes.
I might know someone who has a perception that he's, and then I believe I don't actually investigate and interrogate myself, because I too have gone through a lot of this stuff, and I've seen people post stuff that are taken out of context and said
Completely.
and their perception of actually what he stood for is completely and utterly distorted. Because
Yes.
Khalil, we believe what we want to believe, don't we?
Of course.
We put someone in a box. We want to demonize them. We want to hate them. They're the enemy, and therefore they deserve to be taken out, and we rationalize and justify. But as you say, even if he was some of these things that are, neither of you and I stand for,
Yes.
which he wasn't, even that doesn't justify. But the point is, he wasn't even that, because if you really look at it and examine it, and I think a lot of people are just intellectually lazy, aren't they? They just
Yes.
don't press in and try and find out the facts and the truth for themselves, and get very threatened by anything that might disagree with them. It's a dark place, isn't it? To
And
get
you
into
hear-
that. It's a very, very dark place.
Just like the clip that you played, the majority of people who are making these outrageous comments, these evil comments, they don't even know Charlie Kirk.
Yeah.
Like they don't even know. They haven't even taken the time to look into his message, to just sit down and listen to some of the tapes, some of the recordings, read some of the comments. And I'll tell you the big one that's been raised as a red flag, where they said someone was saying this. In fact, the young man that was debating him, Charlie Kirk, the African American, was talking about a comment where it was reported that Charlie Kirk said if he's going on a flight and he sees an African American pilot, he has a concern. He said he raises it. It makes him think, how was this person put there? How did they get this job? Is this a affirmative action position? He said those are thoughts that he's had. Now, the fact that you can be so transparent and honest to openly say that, first of all, is courageous
takes
by
courage.
itself, because he's not saying it to be malicious. He is saying it to say, let's look at this. These are questions that come up to me, and I'm sure I'm not alone. And to be perfectly honest, he the same guy said, well, that's racist. He said, no. Listen, he said, if you create, and he said, let's put the comment in context. He was talking about how affirmative action was creating quotas that were not based on merit, but historic wrongs, past injustices. He said he acknowledged past injustices. He said, but he doesn't see this as a solution in order to address it.
Right.
That's a perfectly
the right way to fix it.
legitimate position. Yes. And he used a further example. He said to the young man, African-American young man, a college student, if in the NBA, that's, let's say 75% African-American, 75% Black and people of color, right? If in the NBA tomorrow we said that there has to be 50% white players, or in fact, because there's more whites in America than there are Blacks, there needs to be 55% in order for it to be fair and equal. He looked and and he asked the guy, he said, and Charlie said, look, man, I'm not a basketball player or anything like that. We love Larry Bird, but we know we're behind the 8 ball on this one. He said, wouldn't you think it's unfair just because you want a quota that you deny Black guys who are really good an opportunity to play just because you got to fill the quota? Now, that is a very practical example of how he was talking about, made this statement in the context of a specific question that was raised. That's not racism. That is an honest conversation that we ought to have.
Well, it's courageously honest for him, because he set himself up to be criticized. But
he knew he was going to be attacked on all sides. He knew it. He made these comments when the Democratic Party was exerting its full influence over the cultural landscape, which has been for many years. There's no denying that. Our policies, our
Particularly in
political
colleges. Yeah.
perspective has been largely shaped in America, has been largely shaped by the left at a cultural level. We
Yes.
recognize that.
Yeah.
And at the same
Right.
time, we recognized that inevitably that will lead to challenges to the dominant ideology of that period. Now we're moving into something new, something different. And Charlie Kirk embodied that. In many ways, he embodied it.
Well, let me, I mean, sorry to interrupt you, man. Let me play this. This is, I mean, really the theme of this particular medley is free speech under fire. And you know, I've been quite impressed with Bill Maher. I mean, he's a Democrat. He's left-leaning, but he's also one that's, you know, look, let's have
Common
debate.
sense,
Let's disagree.
practical.
Let's agree to disagree.
Yeah.
And let's find the truth wherever it may be found, you know? So yeah, let me jump into this one.
But he was shot under a banner.
Oh,
that
this is
said,
a good-
"Prove
oh,
me
wow.
wrong," because he was a debater. And too many people think the way to do that, to prove you wrong, is to just eliminate you from talking altogether. I think the real war is not between left or right. It's between the people on both sides who want a war and the people who don't.
I think that's accurate. Whatever you thought of Charlie's views is irrelevant. The fact is that what he made his living doing and what he actually did quite well was just going and talking to people on the other side, and that's, you know, what he was killed doing. He was literally in the middle of answering a question and picked up the microphone and was shot in the throat. And we do have a serious problem in this country with people who believe that violence is the proper response to speech. What the polls tend to show is that only 58% of Gen Z believes that there is no excuse for violence in response to speech, meaning that 42% believe that there are some times that violence ought to be a response, which is deeply terrifying. I never, honest to God, thought that we were going to get to this point. Even the assassination of political figures is not the same thing as just being shot in the throat for the crime of debating issues in the public square. We've come to someplace incredibly dark in our nation's history, and I weep for the country, I weep for Charlie. It's horrific.
A lot of the polling we've seen in recent years is all pointing in the wrong direction on this question about how acceptable political violence is. He wanted the debate. He wanted the dialogue. He was not trying to cancel or censor or shut people down. He was killed representing the very American ideal that we settle our fights with words, not with weapons.
My name's Mercury.
Nice to meet you.
Why are you here?
Okay, I've been asked that question a lot, but when people stop talking, really bad stuff starts. When marriages stop talking, divorce happens. When civilizations stop talking, civil war ensues. When you stop having a human connection with someone you disagree with, it becomes a lot easier to want to commit violence against that group. What we as a culture have to get back to is being able to have reasonable disagreement where violence is not an option.
You think that's not emotional violence?
How is this? What is emotional violence, by the way? I don't know what that is.
It is harm intentionally perpetrated on another person that is intentionally targeted at their emotional well-being.
Okay, so feelings mean nothing to me. Isn't why we had the First Amendment to try to push our boundaries and to hear things that might make you mildly uncomfortable?
This doesn't make me mildly uncomfortable.
Does it make you very uncomfortable?
It makes me angry.
Can I ask you a question? I thought.
No!
You're all about. Don't you welcome everyone?
No, we don't welcome
all
everyone.
inclusive.
We don't welcome hateful people.
Well, I'm telling you about the love of Jesus Christ.
Love of your wife on my piece of shit. You're
Do you
really
see where the
fine
hate
guy.
really coming from?
Wow.
Yeah, I mean, trying to shut down, leave, shut up. I don't want to hear you. I mean, it's where's the hate there? You know, the hate is not in the dialogue. The hate is in shutting down the dialogue.
Yes, absolutely.
And the human connection thing, Khalil, that's what it is, man. We've had this discussion often, man. Human first.
Yes.
Before anything, I'm a human being. Before I'm a man, before I'm a Christian, before I'm a whitey, before I'm a
Anything.
South African,
Yeah.
before I'm a Democrat, all of those things are secondary to my humanity.
Yes.
And that's our connection, isn't it? You know, you and I are
Absolutely.
equally valuable human beings, and we can disagree completely. Doesn't change our humanity. Doesn't give me any right to be violent against you or you against me. We're brothers, you
Of
know,
course.
regardless of our beliefs.
And I think that, listen,
Yeah.
Charlie Kirk stepped into that space with that fundamental belief. I mean, he stated it.
Yep.
When we stop talking, horrible things happen.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so those who would seek to silence his voice and to kill him will see that they have actually done the opposite.
Yeah.
They have done the opposite,
Very
brother.
much so. You know what? Yeah. You can kill a man, you can't kill an idea. Huh? And that's the key.
Now the idea, Charlie Kirk's ideas are now part of a fabric that this country and the world has to come to terms with.
And it's been amplified, hasn't it? Amplified
Everywhere,
enormously.
everywhere.
Yeah.
It's being amplified. I was mentioning to you.
You know, Khalil.
No, go
Yeah,
ahead,
carry on.
please.
You know, one of the, and just bear with me here. One of the logical fallacies or misconceptions that people have is that, let's just take the whole issue of transgender, for instance. You know, the idea that if I don't believe that a man can become a woman and a woman can become a man because it's biologically unsound, it's anti-science. If I believe that, people would equate that to, for me, being transphobic and speaking hatefully. Now, those are two totally different things.
Yes.
Because in actual fact, if I believe that, and you are a young man who wants to become a woman, who believes he's a woman, and I state that to you and say, look, maybe you should look at what's happening psychologically as opposed to wanting to do major surgery. That, in fact, could be a far more loving thing to do than say, well, go and do the surgery, go and do life altering. You cannot conflate disagreeing with transgenderism with hating transgender people. You cannot do that.
Yes.
It's wrong. Because in actual fact, it could be the opposite. By agreeing with what I believe is by affirming your delusion. You take someone who's schizophrenic, you know, and they come and they think they're Napoleon, you know, in their mind they're Napoleon.
Yeah.
You know, that's their reality.
Yes,
I
of
mean,
course.
who am I to argue with that? You know, and they come and if I say then yes, you are Napoleon. Here's your sword. You know, that's not loving.
No.
You know, that's helping them in a delusion. So by calling out what I believe to be the truth, I'm actually wanting to help them and to be loving towards them. By affirming what I believe is a delusion, that's not love, you know?
Yes.
And so if you get people with differing ideas on transgenderism, it doesn't mean they're hateful. It could actually, in fact, mean they're loving because they want you to find the best solution.
Of course. But you bring a very important.
It's a bizarre conflation.
But you're raising actually a critical point in this discussion about Charlie Kirk, because we've discovered that his killer, his assassin, was in fact attending a vocational program, enrolled in a vocational program, and in a relationship, apparently a romantic relationship with a person who's transitioning through their transgender process from male to female.
Right.
So this
Right.
idea that you just raised, that if someone challenges the science of male and
Right.
female and the idea that transgender is something to be feared or something to be hated. I don't think Charlie ever made comments
No.
from the place of being hateful. In fact, I've heard influencers who are gay and others who don't share his views say that they had conversations regularly with Charlie where he simply shared his views and they shared theirs. So
It was respectful and they agreed to disagree.
it's just okay.
Yeah.
So for a 22-year-old in a relationship,
what people are saying is, if you don't agree with me, you hate me. If you don't agree with me, you're committing violence against me.
Yes.
If you say something that offends me, it's violent, and I have the right to react violently in self-defense. I mean, it's such a dark notion. It's an evil notion, isn't it?
Yes, it is. I think, and it's also a complete distortion of our humanity.
Yeah. Absolutely.
It's a complete
Absolutely.
distortion of our humanity. You know, we're human beings. You know, we're here to share this experience, not deny
Yeah.
it
Yeah.
to others. Share it.
Absolutely. And shutting down someone's ability to talk and share what they believe is dehumanizing.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, who gives me or you the right to shut me or you down? who gives us that right? You know?
Yes,
Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe I'm wrong. You know, we need to go into every conversation thinking, maybe I'm wrong.
that's right.
And the other person must also think, well, maybe I'm wrong. Let's listen and let's try and, find the way to the truth. And if we don't agree, let's disagree. Let's agree to disagree respectfully as humans, as
Respectfully.
brothers. You know,
Yes.
it's not difficult. Yeah, we've come. You know, I mean, a lot of people have been saying that political assassinations you can kind of understand. There've been many throughout the world. It happens, but this is a bit. It's a bit different to that.
It
you know?
is.
I mean, like Martin Luther King wasn't assassinated for his political beliefs. He was assassinated for his human rights beliefs,
Yes.
wasn't he? You know, and this is kind of also a human rights type thing, isn't it? It's not a political.
Oh yeah.
I mean, people want to label it as political, but you get so many Democrats on the left saying this is abhorrent, unacceptable. So it's not a purely political thing. It's an ideological thing.
yes.
It's a cultural Marxist type thing where we're shutting down people's right to speak. So it goes quite deeply to the psyche of not just America, but the world where we're at the moment, isn't it?
Well, we saw it over the weekend a massive far right march in the UK that they held and
Yeah.
was organized to memorialize Charlie Kirk. And again, when we hear the term far right, for many people, that means racist. But
Yeah. Homophobic, Nazi, Hitler.
all of it means all of those horrible things when
Yeah.
you say far right. Just
Mm.
like when you say far left. I mean, the idea
Mm.
is that you're talking about people who, for whatever reason, you can easily label. Now, I'm simply saying
Yeah.
that my experience of this conversation that Charlie's been having specifically, well, if someone in the far right wants to talk about his message, that's great. They're going to have to deal with what he said. And that's the most powerful part of this. You've got to now look at what was actually said and the context that it was said
Yeah,
in.
the facts. Deal with the facts.
Deal with and have a conversation, a healthy conversation that challenges our
Yeah.
comfort, our ideological and political
You know, Khalil,
comfort and labels.
don't you hope that, I mean, there always used to be that term in America, the silent
Majority.
moral majority, you know, the moral majority, you know,
Yes.
which are, you know, probably either slightly left of center or slightly right of center, but they're kind of in that realm where they're sensible human beings.
Yes.
They don't want to kill anybody.
Yes.
They don't want, you know, they might want to have a dialogue or a debate, but, you know, they don't want to fight. They don't want a war. They might just slightly disagree, but they're all really humane individuals.
Yes.
I wonder in this age of internet, you know, and social media, where you really have the loud voices, you know, I mean, the angry voices are the loudest, you know.
Yes.
I wonder how many people still kind of hopefully fall into that category. I think the one, you know, perhaps something that's swayed it a bit has been the radicalization of college campuses and universities and the very strong kind of left leaning of a lot of academics.
Yes.
Which has really kind of raised this generation, Gen Z, and to be a lot more. You know, I don't even like the word. I mean, liberal. I consider myself liberal, and I consider myself conservative.
Yes.
You know, because I have family values, I have faith, I have belief in God and Jesus Christ, but I also believe, man, in compassion and helping the poor. And I mean, you know, you and I,
Of course.
spend our lives doing that. You know, going into the projects and the townships and the places where people need. I mean, that's for me. That's love.
Yes.
That's compassion. That's liberalism. So, I mean, these labels that we put on people are so crazy. But when you bring an element of collectivism, when an element of let's get rid of, you know, let's eradicate any kind of individual excellence and individuality and put into this kind of collective thing, and let's demonize Judeo-Christian values. I mean, that starts to become a bit dark.
Yes.
But I wonder, I wonder how many people still, because our entire civilization, the entire West is built on conservative values,
Yes.
Christian, Judeo values, hard work, discipline, compassion, love, and these are, and we take it for granted that our entire society has been built on this. Now we start hating that, getting rid of that. Where does that take us?
I think that, we're at a place where the chaos is so intense that it's hard for us also to remember that we've had many chaotic periods. And
yeah,
they give rise to challenges that we need to face in this time, in this period, at this stage of global history. Because the things we're talking about, brother, are happening around the world. These
they are
marches, the protests, the nationalism, all of these things are happening globally. And in some ways, America is just kind of a barometer for that, if you will. It's an example because in some ways we're further along in our development economically and culturally, to the extent of the conflict. Like, what happens when you have open borders in the way that liberalism envisioned it? What really happens?
Yes.
What happens when you say that there will no longer be borders on a continent for the moving of goods and services? What we never knew what those answers were. We guessed, but we didn't really know. We're getting some answers now to some questions that we didn't have any clear sense of.
Real time.
In real time.
Real time answers.
Yeah. Because people,
you know what they say about America. If America sneezes, the world catches a cold, and it's.
So I'm seeing this as something that is a global phenomenon, and though we're talking about, in this case, Charlie Kirk, in many ways, Charlie Kirk represents how we reconcile that global phenomenon of conflict and division and polarization.
Yeah.
We're seeing that him stepping up into that space, debating on the basis of faith. He put faith before politics. Let's just be clear.
He did.
This was not someone who was going out there talking about be a Republican. That wasn't his message. Even though that's now being conflated, that wasn't his message.
Yeah.
His message was Bible-based. I mean, literally, he spoke from scripture, and he did obviously take on other ideas, but I'm saying his foundation was a fundamental Judeo-Christian belief system. And so we're arguing with that, let us ask ourselves where we stand.
Well, that's a brilliant point you raised there, because doesn't it make you so frustrated and so angry and so upset and distressed at how much the Bible has been misconstrued? I mean, if you take the New Testament, it's a testament of love.
Yes.
What did Jesus say? I mean, all the law is summed up in love your neighbor as you love yourself.
Yes.
It's love. He talked about forgiveness. He talked about equality.
Yes.
He talked about every man is created equal under,
Yes.
There's no black, there's no white, there is just human being. This is the biblical message. And I think it's been so incredibly distorted. If you look at the West, as I said earlier, based on Judeo-Christian principles, 100%, you don't find, you want to start a church in Iran. Good luck, man. But you can put a mosque up in any Western nation,
Yes.
because of the tolerance, of the respect, of the honoring of different cultures, different people, out of love.
Yes.
But you cannot do that Ron, you can't go to Saudi Arabia and want to start a mega church there, Christian pastor. It's not going to work very
Right.
well.
We had,
So the
brother,
level of
we had
tolerance in the
trouble
West, and
when we sent our Salvation Army, when we sent help to Saudi Arabia, there was a policy where they said they couldn't have the crosses on the trucks. They had to cover up the crosses on the trucks.
Amazing.
These are
So that's intolerant.
people who are there to help, and their faith of crosses on their vehicles, that was unacceptable.
Yeah.
Now, I'm not saying right or wrong. I'm simply echoing your point that in many other places, the level of tolerance is zero for people of different faith. And so, you're raising a very important point about the consequences of tolerance and intolerance. The consequences of being welcoming of our Judeo-Christian roots and being adversarial about them.
Yeah.
So if I am in a country like that, brother, I have to respect the cultural heritage of that country.
Sure. Absolutely. It's like going to someone's home. I go to your house. If my shoes are dirty, I take them off. I don't want to dirty your floors.
Yes.
If you have certain customs, I'm in your house. I respect your way of doing things. But we've really villainized the West. I look, rampant capitalism when it goes to greed, and sure, it can go wrong. I mean, when we start living a culture that's based on greed and conspicuous consumption, of course things go wrong. And I think America and much of the West has gone that route. But that's it going wrong. The basic fundamental principles of hard work and merit and honoring each other and tolerance and diversity. I mean, those principles on which our countries have been built are Judeo-Christian principles.
Yes.
We mustn't throw those out. If you throw those out, the whole Marxist experiment, which has failed dismally, more people were killed under communist rule in the last century than in any other century, and because of any other thing. You look at Mao Zedong, you look at Stalin, it's just been absolutely devastating because it dehumanizes. It puts everything into the collective. And in fact, it's fundamentally atheistic. Communist Marxist is fundamentally anti-God, atheistic. They don't want, and I think that's what terrifies nations such as communist-led nations or very Islamic nations. This idea of a God who's created us all equal. It terrifies them. But we have to go back to that. We have to go back to those principles. And fundamental to those principles is I respect you deeply as a human being, and you can disagree with me, and I'm not going to take offense to that. And even if I feel offended, I'm not going to show that, because you have equal rights to me to have your view.
Yes.
That is the Christian way.
Yeah. And I think that you hit the nail on the head. You used a statement, you frame the statement by, I have a responsibility. Each of us have a responsibility in this.
Yeah.
And we can't outsource that responsibility or ignore that responsibility because we disagree with someone. In fact, it becomes even more meaningful when we disagree with someone, because then it has to be put into practice. These principles have to be put into practice.
Correct.
I have to demonstrate my love. I no longer have to say, I no longer can get away with simply saying I love you. I now have to demonstrate it, because your views are deeply different than my own. And consequently, our conversation is going to bring up things in us that we might not even have known was there, because most of us arrive at our views quite unconsciously. That is to say,
we do.
We're socialized into our views and values. And that's an incidental learning. Rarely is it just a strict, straightforward, straight line. It doesn't happen like that.
Yes.
So,
no.
And I know that unless you debate these ideas openly, passionately, what happens is young people like the assassin, Tyler, they end up in echo chambers where no one's debating anything.
Yeah, absolutely.
And you get
No.
and you're radicalized by ideas that were never debated. And I say that
Yeah.
because I know the power of being radicalized by ideas that you then don't debate and really, really challenge in the context of your lived experience, your own experience. And that's what Charlie Kirk did brilliantly. He said, look, let's just take it. Let's have the conversation.
Yeah. I could be wrong. You could be wrong.
Yeah,
but
let's have the
talk.
conversation. Yes.
And
that's the
and
beauty.
isn't that the tragedy of universities? University is a place where you go to learn how to
That
think,
is
where you go to be mentally challenged.
It is,
academically
and it's a
stretched.
place.
And if you don't have that,
you would expect to debate ideas at a university. It is the institution
exactly.
that challenges us to engage in new and innovative and oftentimes conflicting ideas.
Absolutely.
So
that's how you learn. That's how you find the truth. It's how you grow.
it is
It's
that
how you
is
become
right.
a rounded human being.
That's right. He was doing that. That's the
And,
work he was doing.
He was doing that. Yeah.
Because he himself
And
left
you
school.
know, think about it. He did.
He left.
Yeah. You think about your love muscle, your ability to love is only really tested when you find people that you consider unlovable.
Yes.
Or your level of tolerance is only tested when you find someone that you disagree with.
Yes.
Because if everyone disagrees with you, it's easy. You don't have to tolerate because you agree with me.
Of course.
That's why I'm saying that offense is a good and necessary thing. You and I both come from a physical training
Yes.
background. You want to grow that muscle, you got to resist, man. You got to do resistance exercises.
Yes.
You want to grow your character, you need to find offense.
Of
Things that
course.
resist make you feel uncomfortable. If you don't, you're going to be a very emaciated, skinny, characterless, anemic, spineless creature
Absolutely.
because you've never actually tested and had resistance to your ideas and your beliefs. There's another clip that Marty put together here just around what next, and it's what is gratifying about what's happened here is there's been no violent response.
Yes.
There's been no looting, no burning, no shouting for violence. It's been absolutely. There've been prayer vigils. There's been a call for more dialogue. I mean, it's been quite phenomenal. Let me just play this.
It's still up to us, and we're not going to be deterred. Charlie's voice is not silent. We're going to pick up that bloodstained microphone where Charlie left it. And to those who would intimidate, who would seek to stop us, who would seek to end free discussion, who believe that they have ownership over public spaces and can violently threaten and kill people who speak freely, we are not going to stop. And I have two words. F you. We will not stop telling the truth. We will never stop debating and discussing. We will never stop standing up for what America is and for what she should be. And we will never let Charlie Kirk's voice die.
Charlie loved his children, and he loved me with all of his heart. Every day he would ask me, how can I serve you better? How can I be a better husband? How can I be a better father? Such a good man. My husband laid down his life for me, for our nation, for our children. He showed the ultimate and true covenantal love. Our world is filled with evil, but our God, you guys, our God is so good. The evildoers responsible for my husband's assassination have no idea what they have done. If you thought that my husband's mission was powerful before, you have no idea what you just have unleashed. The fire that you have ignited within this wife, the cries of this widow will echo around the world like a battle cry. The movement my husband built will not die. My husband's mission will not end, not even for a moment. Our campus tour this fall will continue. There will be even more tours in the years to come. The radio and podcast show that he was so proud of will go on. And in a world filled with chaos, doubt, and uncertainty, my husband's voice will remain, and it will ring out louder and more clearly than ever, and his wisdom will endure. Charlie, I promise I will never let your legacy die, baby. God bless you all, and may God bless America.
Yeah, quite a formidable woman. Hey?
Man, I mean, clearly, the tragedy that she is witness to with the assassination of her husband. No one can say that this kind of evil should be able to exist without us challenging it at every turn, at every step, challenging it. And I mean, the clip that you just, it's heart wrenching, brother. It's heart wrenching. We are in pain, and we are also at a place where we know more now than ever. We need to be different than we've been. We need to
better
tone down the blaming and the indictments and the hateful comments and
the labeling. The name calling.
Why would any person be convinced that killing someone is justified because of the way they express their views? That's just unacceptable for us as a society. And all of us,
absolutely,
each of us, have to do our part to stop that kind of evilness wherever we are in the
100%.
world, brother.
And Khalil, I think what we are saying, and I'm sure you agree, we're not saying agree with Charlie.
No.
We're not saying be the same as us. We're saying let's love each other, let's respect each other, let's honor each other. If we disagree with each other, even if we disagree with each other's lifestyles, that doesn't conflate to hating you.
Yes.
It conflates to speaking what we believe to be the truth.
Yes.
If I believe Jesus Christ is the way, the truth, and the life, and you don't, it doesn't mean I'm hating you. And it means I believe that and you don't, and I respect that. And I still consider you an equally valuable human being to me. But I want to share my truth, what I believe to the truth, and I want to hear what you believe to be the truth.
Yes.
And we can walk as brothers, and we can walk as fellow human beings with respect, with love, with tolerance, with understanding. Let's do that. That's what America was founded on, wasn't
Certainly.
it? Every man created equal under God. That's what we're all about. Words are not violence.
Yes.
Offense is not bad.
Yes.
No one has the right to take your rights away. Every person on this earth should have equal opportunity and equal rights, because for one reason only, they're human beings, and we all created equal under the eyes of God. I mean, this is what we're trying to say.
That's
isn't
it. That's the fundamental message. And I think that when people use different words than us to share their views, we have to be willing to listen. And
absolutely. Yeah.
You have to be a really fragile person to be moved to violence because you disagree with what someone has said. That's a wounded human being.
Very insecure, very fragile.
And so,
very much so.
Without knowing the full details of Charlie Kirk's assassin, this young man that is alleged to be the perpetrator, he is a deeply wounded human being. And
very much so.
It is in our interest to look at how he became that way. Because I think if we look closely at how a young man raised in that kind of environment reaches the extreme thinking that he did, as a society, it's a wake-up call. We need to really pay attention.
Very much so.
He didn't do this out in some state.
In a vacuum.
That's right. This wasn't in Washington, D.C., where we consider
No.
liberals and leftists and all those kinds of labels to be the target and the perpetrators. This was in red Republican Utah, conservative Utah. If the radicalization can happen in that space,
It can happen
it can
anywhere.
happen anywhere.
Yeah.
And so,
And we've also got to look, Khalil, is what is wounding young men and young women?
that's what I'm talking about, brother.
Every one of those school shooters, deeply, deeply wounded human being. They weren't seen, they weren't validated, they weren't understood, they weren't properly taught, and they went into a very dark wormhole in the dark web and became radicalized. So you're 100% right. It's the woundedness.
Yes.
It's the woundedness that does it. Doesn't justify it, but it explains it. But we got to look at the society which we're creating, which enables people to grow up so wounded
Yes.
and so radicalized.
That's what I'm saying. We need to look at ourselves. This challenges us to hold the mirror up in front of ourselves, each of us,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
ask,
Yeah.
how are we complicitous in this? What role do we have? What power, what agency can we exercise to change courses, to make a difference, to bring healing to a very wounded space and very wounded people?
Very much so. You know, the it's a very lazy, foolish, cowardly to throw labels at people instead of debating them.
Yes.
You know, I mean, if you label me a racist, man, that kind of puts me out of the game, you know, because that's one of the worst things in the world I can be. If you label me a homophobe or a transphobe, you know, you kind of, as opposed to saying, well, let me hear what you have to say.
Yes.
Let's talk it through. You know, labeling. You know, you label someone a fascist, label them a Nazi, label them a, you know, all these different things we do. That's not discussion. That's just kind of a very lazy way of just weaponizing something and writing them up without really actually having the courage and the intellectual capacity to discuss and find truth. And try and together come to a place of, you know, of love.
That was, and again,
Khalil,
that's brother, that is what I have been so inspired by in terms of Charlie Kirk's legacy. It's that he did what we're talking about. I mean, literally, he committed himself to doing it, and he lived it. So
he did.
Those of us who would sit back, criticize, indict, and try to diminish or cancel his contribution, they are going to be on the losing side of history. And they are going to be
I agree.
Stuck in a place of woundedness unless there is a recognition of the power that each of us have and the obligation that we have to have a conversation that encourages each of us to be truthful and at the same time respectful of our differences.
Absolutely.
Just respectful.
I think that sums it up. I mean, there's not anything more to say. That really hits it on the head, man.
Brother.
Brother, always great talking and unpacking these big issues, important issues.
Yes.
And, you know, really trying to make the world a better place.
That's at the end of the day, that's the aim.
Understanding, tolerant place.
That's the aim, brother.
Absolutely. To depolarize.
Depolarize.
Yeah.
And reconcile.
Depolarize. Awesome, brother. Yeah, exactly. God bless, man.
All right, brother. Have a good one.